Once a month, when the moon reaches its highest point in the sky and the wild creatures call out to the night, he emerges from a private sanctuary in an undisclosed location outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Arrayed in his priestly vestments, carrying forth the good news that comic books and graphic novels aren't just for kids, that they aren't just mass and spandex superheroes, that storytelling in a graphic format can be so much more. He is the graphic novel apostle.
Hello and welcome back to the Graphic Novel Apostle podcast. I'm your host, Mark Orenberger, and I'm thrilled to be here with you this Monday morning as always, or more or less most always. We have another full episode today where I've got a friend of mine here in the guest seat, and we are going to be talking through the book Saga, Volume 1. And today I have my friend Craig Brukardt all the way from Washington, D.C. Craig, how are you, man?
Doing well. Glad to be here. This is awesome.
I am so happy you're here. You know, when I released the first episode of this podcast, I should say maybe you and I were friends for several years while you lived here in the Little Rock area. And at some point during the pandemic, you up and moved to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I even realized at the time that you had. But you've always been a little bit of an international man of mystery, I think.
I did do a little bit of a Irish goodbye, I guess. It was super quick. It was just like time to go. And I was like, all right. I said goodbye to like maybe my mom, and then that was about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been great out on the East Coast. And yeah, just this whole thing, when you texted me about it, I was like, of course. Like, I didn't think I knew at the time that you also read comics and graphic novels, but I didn't get into it until COVID.
Neither did I, actually.
Okay, so I think Mouse, I think I told you this, but like Mouse was like my first introduction. Because like as a kid, comics were not cool. Like nobody really cared, I guess.
Yeah.
But like I think it was mostly like Power Rangers and toy cars, like the Hot Wheels and stuff. Sure. That's like what we got into.
And we should say you're 32.
Yes.
So you're about a dozen years younger than me.
Yes.
And we've managed a friendship despite it.
Yeah.
Okay, but please go ahead.
Well, I think because I got into this so late, I was a little annoyed at myself of like, oh, like all those years doing like the reading class assignments, I hated doing that. But then once I read Mouse, I was like, oh, I could have done this the whole time, just the way that I needed to do it.
Sure.
And yeah. Mouse.
So something about that format spoke to you then.
Yeah.
Okay. And man, we need to do Mouse on this show for sure. One of the great important graphic novels.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, you know, these days one of the frequently banned books, which is appalling. But
that's how I got into it.
Okay.
Yeah, they banned it, and I was like, well, I gotta read it.
Now I gotta know. Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Today's episode is going to be different because so many of my friends who come on as guests are doing so as a favor to me. They would not read a comic book otherwise. And, usually have enjoyed it. And really with the whole graphic novel apostle concept, that's what I sort of set out to do, was talk to my friends who don't read comics. And after we released the first episode of this podcast, and I think I texted it to you.
Yeah.
Because I thought, knowing Craig's personality, and I had no idea that you were reading graphic novels or comics at all, but I was like, I think Craig would enjoy this. And so I sent it to you and discovered immediately that you and I guess about the same time, kind of discovered this hobby.
Yeah, I think it just, I've said this before, is that like you are just the decade older version of me, of like same music, same kind of, we just like the same kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, and actually specifically we've talked about this with, Parrish Pollard has been on the show before, my good friend Parrish, and your good buddy Taylor.
Yeah.
White. You made the observation before, it's like, oh yeah, we're like Mark and Parrish, a generation younger.
Yeah.
And that's so right. And I think that's why we've clicked so well. And it's funny to me, with Garrett, of course, you saw him this morning when you came over here to the house for the first time in probably 5 years or close to it.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
But, he was a little dude when you were coming over here to the house. And, I remember you came over one time, I think it was to watch the Royal Rumble.
Yep. Yeah.
And it was you and me and Garrett, because Natalie was at work, I sometimes I think she intentionally schedules work when when we're going to have things like a WWE show.
She's
and
actually
company.
very familiar with WWE's lineup, knows every episode, every person, just to know when to avoid it.
That's it, right? When she's got to mysteriously be out of the house for some reason. But you came over, and at the time you're a dude in your late 20s, single guy, and while you have always been a super family friendly person, someone who's always going to interact with people's kids, I was sort of like, oh man, I brought poor Craig over here, and I've got Garrett jumping off the couch to do a Macho Man, elbow on you. And at the time we had a toddler that we were fostering, and he was in a little playpen in the living room, and I was like, this is like chaos in this house. But you were very generous about that.
Yeah.
So thanks.
I try to. I feel, or I've been told, I guess, that I am somewhat formal with children.
Oh, okay.
The way that I speak to them, and that it scares them. And I was like, I don't know how I'm being formal. I've never thought of myself as a formal person in any context.
When you took off your top hat and bowed to Garrett when you came in, I did think that was a little putting on airs, But no, I would have never thought that, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been fun. I think especially being back and seeing everyone's kids being half a foot taller.
Yeah.
That's weird, seeing, people's kids getting ready to pick colleges and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, I remember you back when.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're in town for a couple of weeks, and I come to discover that you have grown a glorious mustache in the time since I've seen you last.
Thank you. Took a lot of work.
Well, it was worth the effort. And but also through our text conversations over the last 6 or 8 months, as we kind of discovered we had this shared hobby, it turned out we liked a lot of the same books, a lot of the same writers, a lot of the same artists, and that's really cool. But today's episode, as I've mentioned before, is also going to be different in this way. So often I'm picking out a book that I think is going to suit the guest who has come on the show, and I'm saying, I think you would really like this if you would just give it a chance. And today, we're doing a book that you have read before, and I had not until this week.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of cool. The tables are turned a bit. And I'll tell you, I'm glad that you brought the book Saga in today, because I've been familiar with Saga for as long as I've been around comics, because it is one of those independent comic properties that people in the comics world go nuts for.
Yeah.
And I think when I first started reading, Saga has been known to take very long hiatuses throughout its development. This Saga Volume 1 that we're going to talk about today, which collects issues 1 through 6 of the comic, was from March through August of 2012. Issue 70 of Saga came out this month, November of 2024. So, you just sort of do the math and you're like, yeah, there's some big breaks in there.
Yeah.
And I would always hear, other comics people talking about oh, the solicits 3 months from now, we're going to get Saga's going to come back with issue 60 or whatever. And people would be so excited for it. And I thought, okay, I need to get back to that and just check it out. But I just had never gotten around to it. So tell me your history with this.
Well, so when I moved to DC, found out, I knew there was a comic book store here in North Little Rock.
Yeah, and it's moved to Sherwood now.
Okay. And I'd never gotten to go, but I'd gotten Mouse, like I was saying earlier, from Barnes & Noble. And I was like, okay, I want to get into this. Just reading, having pictures while I'm reading helps me so much, with staying on track of I can read a paragraph 3 times and I know I've read that 3 times, but it's not stuck. I get lost. And so I started getting into stuff. And when I went to DC, I went to Phantom Comics. It's in DuPont Circle. A little shout out for them, I guess.
Shout outs.
Went in there and I was like, hey, I'm kind of new to all this. What's something that you guys would think I'd like? And they were like, well, everyone seems to really like this. And they pointed me to Saga.
Oh, cool. So this was an early experience for you once you got into comics. Nice.
Yeah. And since then, I don't know, I've spent probably close to $1,000 on different graphic novels. But yeah, Saga was the one, when new issues came out, I went to the store, make sure I got one, told them to hold it for me.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But yeah, like for me, it was one that I really fell in love with the characters. How I look at my purchase, if I'm going into a comic book store, I go in and, I judge a book by its cover a little bit.
Well, you're supposed to with comics.
Yeah. But I do a quick flip through the pages and I look at just the style of the art and then the font. Like, is the font going to be something that I enjoy looking at? I don't know why, but that's how I go about it.
I appreciate that, though, because I go back and read a lot of comics from the 90s when there was still a lot of hand lettering going on.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes it would even be in script. And I'm like, that's something for me to overcome.
Yeah.
And it may really deter me from reading something long term.
I read Luke Cage, like it was an omnibus from the library that I got.
Mm-hmm.
And I, like, if you ever watched the blaxploitation movies, or if you like Dolomite kind of stuff, it kind of has that feel to it.
Very much, yeah.
And I enjoy that.
Okay.
And I was reading it and I was just like, I love everything about what I'm reading or what I'm seeing except for the font.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I can't get over this font for whatever reason. And I finished it, but I was just like, yeah, I wouldn't choose to read this again.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't say, yeah, you should read this unless you just really loved Luke Cage. Then that's the only reason I'd offer it up to somebody. But
yeah,
Saga, multiple types of font depending on who's speaking. The main character, the baby at this point in the story,
Helen.
Hazel.
Yeah. Is it Hazel?
Hazel, yeah. She has her own font, and it's just I feel like every time Hazel speaks, it's either in a curve or it's in a weird part of the page that I just kind of appreciate. Of this is the narrator talking. I don't know. I loved how they did that. I'm
really glad you said that, because that was one of the things I had very early on in my notes, that, so often when you get narration from, whether it's, a third party sort of divorced from the book narrator, or whether it is one of the characters telling the story contemporaneously or in the past tense, you get it in those text boxes. And they'll be set off sometimes by really creative design on the text box. And I like that, but I thought it really added, especially with, in this book, Fiona Staples' art. She's pretty sparing on backgrounds to great effect. Mm-hmm. And so the narrator text looks to be handwritten, but it's extremely legible. It's printed. It's not not cursive. And it often contours around the shapes of one of the characters or some object in the panel. And so it also is able to be kind of free-flowing on the page. I really like that. That sets it off for me in a very interesting way. And then when the characters are actually speaking, you get just your standard word balloons and standard comic lettering.
Yeah.
Which is great. So, yeah, that's really interesting. And let me run through the credits on this book real fast, because I don't want to overlook that. But then I do want to get back to a little more of how you choose a graphic novel for yourself.
Okay.
So this is Saga Volume 1. It was published by Image Comics back in 2012. And as I mentioned earlier, this Volume 1 collects issues 1 through 6, published between March and August of 2012. The series is ongoing still, as I mentioned. It's currently on issue 70. It was written by Brian K. Vaughn, who is also well known for authoring Why the Last Man. I don't think we see Brian K. Vaughn quite as much in comics these days. He's been a big-time comic writer over the years, and I think he has done a lot of work in Hollywood in the last several years. Also been involved in adapting a lot of Marvel television shows, like the Runaways show, and some others. And then artist Fiona Staples, and I believe she did the color as well, because there's not a separate color artist credited. And I hear her name a lot in discussion of great comic artists, but I don't think I'd read anything that she drew before, and I loved it. And then lettering for this book is attributed to Fonografiks. Craig, go back into that a little more, as we were talking a moment ago about what you're looking for when you go into a shop and you're looking at a graphic novel on the stands. Also, before you get to that, do you collect single issue comics at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I on National Free Comic Book Day, I'll get the ones that I like.
Sure.
That just look good. And then I'll read through those, And then if there's one that I'm like, oh, this sounds good. The last one that I can think of is Fish Flies.
Oh, by Jeff Lemire. Yeah.
I love Jeff Lemire. That's like, I think that's probably my guy. Like
Okay.
anything he's written, I've really liked. Sweet Tooth, I think, was probably what really got me into this world of like graphic novels. Like, I really like Saga. I would say Sweet Tooth is top 5 favorite story of all time.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. And I have all 3 volumes of it downstairs, and I haven't read it yet.
Oh yeah, read that immediately.
Okay.
Like there's the show now, and the show's not terrible. It's just most obviously not the graphic novel.
Okay.
And so I was trying to watch it, and I was just like, man, Jeff just made an amazing story that can't be replicated on TV. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's too good a story. And then he has Sentient, and that's the one I need to read next. I've not gotten into that one.
Okay. So we did, and for listeners of this show, Stephen Hovatter and I did Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino's Gideon Falls, Volume 1.
Yeah.
And, Jeff Lemire is incredibly prolific. The stuff that he does with Andrea Sorrentino, I am most likely to be drawn to because I really, really like Sorrentino's art.
Yeah.
And it's funny, before you leave today, I'll have to show you my graphic novel bookshelf downstairs. I have dedicated the top shelf. I have to alphabetize stuff, right? But except the top shelf. And the top shelf is just for the creators who are my top of the top's favorite creators. So I've got all my Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips stuff up there. I've got all my Jacob Phillips stuff that he's done either with Chris Condon or with Chip Zdarsky in the book Newburn. But then I've got all my Lemire and Sorrentino up there as well, and then my Cullen Bunn books. So anyway, I'm working my way through the other Jeff Lemire stuff as well that's not with Andrea Sorrentino, but always good. I always like what he does. So I will make that a priority then to get to Sweet Tooth next. I actually have a friend in mind I've been thinking might be a good one to do Sweet Tooth with, and I've been wanting to have on the podcast. So maybe it'll be a little Christmas project.
I think the thing that's been most helpful with this too, and I guess I think of it for like cartoons, is like your ability to create anything, like cartoons, graphic novels, like you can do that. Whatever you have in your mind, do it. As a kid, I'd watch a James Bond movie and be like, man, look at this crazy watch that James Bond has, or this crazy car.
Right.
And I just, would think man, that's awesome to be able to have that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then now, if I watch something that's like a cartoon and it's just our plain Jane world, I'm like, you could have just filmed this. This didn't need to be animated. And so, yeah, I love what people can do with a story, and it can be super original. And that's the first thing I look for is okay, if I pull out the book and I look at the cover, am I going to see stuff that I've seen a million times before? So I want something original. And this goes back to my 3 books that I pull to see which one I'm going to buy. Whenever I go in, because I know I will spend hundreds of dollars if I don't have rules.
Gotta have rules.
So I'll go in and I'll find 3 books, and I start by looking is this going to be an original story? Is this something that I've never seen before? One that I got actually was called Postal. Mm-hmm. I did not super care for the story.
Okay.
It wasn't my favorite, but as far as originality, the most original story I've ever read.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was like, that's what I want. I want the most original. And then I want to see art and word combined in just some beautiful way. Just the way that the font looks. And I've been lucky enough, I guess, in DC that I've met a few artists, that have written books, and I've read their stuff.
Sure.
And man, they talk all the time about man, if you know how to write well, you can write fonts and scripts, your ability to get paid is through the roof.
Yeah.
So if you're good at that, there's money in it.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. When we look at each section of the page, you see first, okay, this is where the information is. I have to read the bubble. And if that is not appealing, then that's the first impression. You're not going to enjoy necessarily the rest of it. So yeah, I flip through a few pages whenever I'm in the store and I look, okay, is this font something that I want to look at?
Yeah.
And then I look at the art and it's like, does this art make sense to my eyes, I guess?
Sure.
It's like I got Saga and I was like, okay, this art is incredible. Like you look at the pages and you can tell each one is done like extremely well. Like it took time to do this, and I appreciate that. Like you can't not when you look at each page. I mean, there's so much in each issue Fiona had to draw that I'm just like, man, the amount of skill it takes to do what you do is impressive.
It's so true. It's funny, the things that grab one person or another, because when you say, I want to see something like I've never seen before, or something that, why wouldn't this just be a real life television show or something like that? I'm not looking for anything like that necessarily. So for me, color is something that really speaks to me. And a well-colored book is something that I'm more likely to pick up off the shelf. And that was one of the things I really noticed and really liked about Fiona Staples' art in this book. It's colored beautifully, but also her line drawing, it's very simple, it's very clean, and it's really beautiful. Like the character designs are lovely and drawn consistently throughout. They look, even though they have some, fantasy kind of elements to the designs, they're still very much humanoid, and they look like a person,
I've seen quite a few novels do this where an issue will have one artist, and then in the next one it'll be a different artist, maybe even a different artist again.
Yeah.
Does that turn you off at all?
If there's not a reason for it, it does very much.
Okay, yeah, me too.
And you see that more with Marvel and DC than you do with independent. Creator-owned comics tend to be done explicitly and only by the creators.
That's the one thing that I wish I could. For some reason, my eyes are like, this character looks this way.
Mm-hmm.
I can't like go back and forth between how this character looks. I need it to look the same every time.
So I love Batman. Behind the Silver Surfer, he's my favorite character in superhero comics. And there are times where I go, I don't know what Bruce Wayne looks like, because he can be drawn different by every artist that picks up the book. And I appreciate that each artist is going to have their own take. And while styles may be different, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm really not sure, sure, especially if we're changing haircuts or how much facial hair growth or stubble he's wearing. And where it really gets me is with the Robins, because there have been so many characters who have been Robin over the years, unless there are very clear character clues or their costumes. So especially when they're out of costume, I'm like, okay, so are we dealing with Dick Grayson right now, or are we dealing with Damian Wayne? Who am I looking at?
Because when I think of Saga, I think like Fiona Staples is the only person that if it was somebody else, I'd become uninterested. Like,
I could see that.
I love this book. I mean, for everything that it is, but Fiona Staples the art really gets me.
So tell me, you said you were waiting for some of these new issues to come out and pick up in single issue. Listeners, let me pause for just a second and tell you this. Craig has been a champion here. You're probably hearing this in the background. I'm going to leave a little bit of this audio in. My dog old Maggie just has to be around us, and she's brought a bone up a couple of times now to where we're recording. And then my son Garrett has come in and wanted to entertain Craig with stories right in the middle of our recording. Craig, thanks for being such a trooper here.
I can't say I understood his stories half the time, but I appreciated them nonetheless.
Well, me neither. All right. So I'm gonna pause just a second and get Maggie's loud chewing bone out of here, and then we'll keep. So before that interruption, and thank you, Craig.
No worries.
We were talking about your consumption of this book, and so have you read this all the way up to current?
No, not the most recent issue. I will need to whenever I get back. That's
but
on my to-do list.
So shy of issue 70, have you read Saga all the way up to present?
Yes.
Oh wow! So you really did.
Is
dive
it 70? This. Yeah. I guess I didn't realize it was 70 at this point, but yeah. And even now, like getting ready for this, I was going back to the beginning and reading the first few issues. And I was like, oh man, I forgot like how much I'd forgotten, because there is so much that happens throughout the story. I mean, the volume or the omnibus, the first one that I have, I was looking at the very back page and remembered like, oh yeah, this thing happened at the end of this. And this book is very emotional.
Yeah.
Like I think I told you this before that we started, but there are not many stories that I get emotional about.
Sure.
Unless I really love the characters. Like there are scenes like The Notebook, where it's just like, oh man, the guy or the woman's losing her memory and it's really sad. I don't cry for that.
Okay.
I know that I'm supposed to, which I don't know if that makes me a psychopath, but
Probably.
but like this, like I love the characters. So if like a character dies or something bad happens to them, for some reason I feel that as long as I care about the character, and almost all of the characters in this book I care about.
Yeah. And I think that is often what is the draw to Saga. At least that's what I've picked up from hearing other people's commentary on it. It's less, maybe the plot is a big part of it, but more than anything, it is the family dynamics and the relationships that go on in this book. And let me read what appears on the back cover of this first volume to sort of set the stage for the story we're talking about. It says, Saga is a sweeping tale of one young family fighting to find their place in the universe. When two soldiers from opposite sides of a never-ending galactic war fall in love, they risk everything to bring a fragile new life into a dangerous old world. Fantasy and science fiction are wed like never before in the first volume of this sexy, subversive, ongoing epic.
Mark, you've now read the first issue. How do you feel? What are your thoughts?
I have to tell you, if I had read just the first issue, if I'd picked it up off the stand right when it came out in 2012, I probably would not have bought the second issue.
Okay.
There were some things that I was a little turned off by. And even at the end of the first volume, I liked these characters a whole lot. I love the art. Absolutely love the art.
Yeah.
And I think our conversation today and really sitting down and writing some notes about the story is kind of talking me into thinking maybe I want to carry on with reading this. But I think if I had just picked this book up, even the whole first collected volume and read through the whole thing, I don't know that I would have gone on to volume 2.
Okay.
And I always feel disappointed when one of my guests says something like that to me. And so I'm sorry that I'm not going 10 out of 10, no notes.
What would keep you from going to the second one?
Sure. This is an issue I have in general with oversized first issues, and that's what they did in this book. Marvel does this a lot too. I understand that you sometimes need more space to set up your story. And this is a story that involves a lot of different sides with a lot of different interests and different alignments of parties and things like that, which you've got to introduce somehow. I felt like the very first issue of this was kind of tedious. And at the end of it, other than the members of this family, the baby Hazel, Marco the father, and Alana, who I'd connected with, I didn't have any real feeling about good guys or bad guys or who I would care about or really even have a very clear sense of how everybody was aligned. Now, some of that could be me as a reader, but I also think a first issue, one of the things that it's job to do, aside from introducing the characters and the plot, is also to sort of set the tempo for its pacing. And when it's over length, I feel like that can be harder to do, for sure. And then, I enjoyed issues 2 through 5 a lot more than issue 1. I think because they went a little, they were a quicker and easier read.
Okay.
They weren't nearly as dense. But the other thing, and this was introduced very early on, and, by the way, to our listeners, I've said before on this show, so many of the books that we do are at least a PG-13 level, if not an R-rated level. And this one would be an R-rated book. I don't mean to be Pollyanna-ish here. I don't certainly have any problem with there being sex or nudity in a comic if the story calls for it.
Yeah.
This felt very unearned.
Yeah.
Like it felt like it was there were sex and graphically depicted nudity that I felt like were gratuitous.
Yeah.
And that kind of turns me off because I think it's cheap.
I did say beforehand, hey, this don't let your son read this. And I was curious if that would hit you the same way, because I wanted to tell a story.
Okay. Well, and let me say first, I'm not offended by it.
No, yeah.
But it feels cheap.
Yeah.
And it feels vulgar. And so that, for me, also kind of took me out of the story a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we get that prominently in issue 1. We get it more prominently in a couple issues in. And I think once you've maybe numbed yourself to that aspect of the storytelling, where I just say, okay, I would tell this differently than another storyteller.
Yeah.
But once you've sort of inured yourself to that, there's a whole lot to like.
Yeah.
So yeah, please, you said you had a story about that.
So I think this was for issue 10. It came out. I went and got it the day it was at the store, and I went around the corner to a little restaurant called the Colada Shop. And I sat at the bar, got a hot chocolate, and
very wholesome.
Yeah, and I'm reading my I'm reading this issue, and I've got my hot chocolate right at the bar, right in front of the waiters, and flip it open, and either the first, second, or third page was just like boobies. They're out, and the waiter is right in front of me, and I'm like, oh, please don't see this. Like, don't think I am just reading smut, And he wouldn't. I knew that he saw it, and like he knew that I knew that he saw it. It was just an odd thing. So yeah. Well, don't read this book in public. That's my bit of advice.
It was also a bad day for you to have worn your trench coat.
Yeah.
No, Craig, he saw that mustache coming in the door. He knew what was up with you.
Yeah, this guy is a creep, but I have to serve him.
Oh, man. You should consider running for governor in North Carolina sometime. Oh, my goodness. But I will say this. As I sort of figured out, the different alliances, and rereading through the first issue a second time to make some notes for this, mm-hmm. I was like, okay, I just tried to go through too fast through the first issue, maybe.
Okay.
And so now that I've got a little better lay of the land, I can appreciate the story more. But also, it's funny, I just talked about how much I love the Silver Surfer, but a space epic that doesn't have the Silver Surfer in it is often a little harder for me to get into.
Okay.
Just is. But I will continue on with this book for sure.
Do you have, I guess, worlds that you are turned off by? Like for me, I do not really enjoy medieval stuff that much.
Oh, interesting. And I like it always.
Okay. Like I've read Headlopper, and I enjoy it and stuff, but I don't really get into the world.
To answer your question though, like it's very hard for me to get into a post-apocalyptic world.
Okay.
And people love The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And I probably would if I sat down and read it. But, post-zombie apocalypse is just not my scene. But What about you? Do you have some of those that kind of, you're like, this setting is not going to be my story?
I think mostly just medieval. There is, I guess, so I read Black Sad, and I got it because of the art. The art is beautiful. But the noir, or whatever that's called, the 50s detective.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I try to get into it because it is kind of cool. Like the characters are all smoking, and they're going to a billiards place, and they're talking in silly voices.
Yeah.
I can appreciate it, but I can't get into it.
And Craig, crime noir is my favorite.
Crime noir, yeah. Okay. Yeah,
crime noir is my favorite genre.
Yeah. I because the Spy Superb, I enjoy the humor. I enjoy the humor of it.
Right.
And I think comedy helps me get into that a little bit more. But like Black Sad is not. It's not super funny. I mean, it kind of is because they're all cats. It's just kind of a funny.
I haven't read that book.
Oh yeah, it's worth reading just for the art. The art is it's incredible, but it's hard for me to I don't know, be a fly on the wall of that type of genre.
I get that. Hey, so one other thing I wanted to say that I really did like about this book is watching Marco and Alana, the husband and wife here, who throughout this volume, Hazel is a baby throughout the whole thing. Well, she's being born in the very first couple of pages, but is a baby throughout the rest of it, probably in her first month of life. These two parents they're very much in love, but they're also kind of still getting to know each other a little bit.
Yeah.
And so they have these little disagreements and little conflicts that are very relatable to any couple, especially to a new parent couple, because, I mean, Natalie and I had been married for 6 years before we had Garrett, and we'd been together for 2 before that. But, you know, you realize when your circumstances are so changed by the thing like the entry of a new little life that has to be cared for, that you realize there are questions that you had not anticipated that you might not automatically see eye to eye on.
Yeah.
And you're not sleeping as much. And none of us is at our best in those times. And so a lot of that felt really real. And it was also really beautiful to see that they would have these little outbursts or snip at one another in that relatable way. But then they'd like fall back into each other's arms, you know, and one of them would just say, I love you so much, you know, and that was really gorgeous. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that relationship develops as we move on past volume 1. So the character work was just so excellent.
Yeah. Marco, especially for me, I do enjoy a story with a good dad.
Yeah.
I think as men, that's something we appreciate of like, oh yeah, like like a story of just going fishing with your dad.
Yeah,
it just kind of makes you feel good. It brings your shoulders down. You're less tense. Marco, in my opinion, is a very good dad. Like, he has come from, he's a soldier. He's done some things that he's not super proud of. Mm-hmm. And he's decided, I'm going to, swear off killing folks. Pretty good in general.
Generally a positive step.
But, I think the idea of him being this, warlord, he can go ham on some folks. Which we find out in later down past the first issue. For him to go between being this crazy warlord type figure to like, I will do anything for my daughter. I love my daughter and I love my wife. And I think that's kind of a cool thing to see. 'Cause it is just like, no matter how bad it gets, like the love is still there. There's no amount of hatred or whatever that comes from the side of being a soldier that like goes into hating on his wife and child. Yeah. I think that's a cool thing.
Whatever rage is fueling him in the fog of war.
Yeah.
Is he sees a totally different world when he looks at his family. Yeah, that is beautiful. Hey, let's talk about the overall political backdrop, I guess would be the best way to describe it, of this book. And so you have a planet called Landfall, and it's described as the largest planet in this particular galaxy where this story takes place. It's the home planet of the mother, Alana. That's Hazel's mom. And the natives of this planet they're humanoid in design, except they have these very large, like fairy or pixie type wings. Marco is from Wreath, and Wreath is the one and only moon of Landfall. And the people there are of a very different species than the people of the planet Landfall. So these people are humanoid looking, except they all have horns or antlers of some kind. And it looks like they could be of all different types. Marco's look like ram's horns coming out of his head. There's a character that is just in a few pages who looks like she's got a unicorn's horn. But then there are some others that appear that have like deer antlers. And that's kind of neat,
It threw me off at first. I was like, wait, are they the same? But then, you read on and you're like, okay, they're on the same team.
And I couldn't tell whether, I don't think that they had any kind of like hooves or, like the lower body of a like goat or, they're not like centaurs or anything like that, or satyrs.
No, I don't.
Satyrs?
Now that I think about it, I've never seen the satyr half. But they're usually just wearing pants.
Right.
So
and they seem to walk with like a normal gait as far as we can tell. But for as far back as anyone can remember, there has been war and deep animosity between the planet of Landfall and the moon of Wreath. And I thought this was kind of an interesting and clever way for this story to have become so much bigger. We get this history told to us where, at first, some of the battles actually took place like in cities on landfall. And I think at some point, everybody realized that there was sort of like this mutually assured destruction in having a hot war between a planet and its moon because of how they gravitationally rely on each other.
Yeah.
So they've sort of outsourced, is the word that's used, their war to all these other planets all over this galaxy. And these people on these other planets, they don't have a stake in this war. They don't want any part of it, but they end up being sort of forced into the war, forced to side with one side or another as a means of survival. Yeah. And something that maybe you know from later issues, but something I don't know as somebody who has read just Volume 1, is whether there is a clear good guy or bad guy among these two warring factions.
Well, I won't spoil it.
Okay.
But I think it's more of the war itself. I guess it gets more into the profitable sides, which actually I watched Free State of Jones last night.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
It's Matthew McConaughey during the Civil War, and it takes place in Mississippi. And Matthew McConaughey's like, we're fighting to get the cotton farmers richer, like make the rich richer. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what's happening in this war is there's money to be made. And so, yeah, like the two sides now, they hate each other. But I think the war more focuses on, these two hate each other for no good reason. But the people that are making money, they're keeping this war going.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where that's heading.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So some other characters that we'll be introduced to here. There's a robot kingdom.
Yes.
Which appears to be an ally of the people of Landfall. Mm-hmm. Ally or maybe clients, basically. Because I guess these robot kingdom people who appear to be very human-like, except that their heads are like computer monitors. And not the computer monitors that we have on our desks today, but like the kind with the big bubble kind of back, you know?
So this is Prince Robot.
Prince Robot the Fourth.
Yes. Whenever I was doing my like kind of look through at the beginning, his face was the first thing I saw, and I was like, that's original. I like it. And so I stuck with it. And the further you read into the story, his character gets so complex that he became my favorite character.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Because they seemed like very much side characters in this first volume.
Oh, yeah. No, it gets into... I mean, it's like kind of like Game of Thrones, how you get to know every side and everything.
Sure.
There's a lot of that in this book.
Well, so in addition to the way they have these odd heads, they're also very formal people. They kind of dress like British aristocracy from the Revolutionary War period.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're a monarchy of some kind, or they seem to be, and yet, like, this prince is being sent out to be the one who's going to be like, let's lead some soldiers and carry out, you know, these war missions, where normally you would think of those types of characters as being back calling out commands, not on the front lines. But something interesting about these folks as well is that their arm can turn into like a laser or a laser cannon when needed. So it makes them pretty lethal too. And he's going to be given the assignment, Prince Robot is, that he has to go and track down and kill Hazel's family.
Yeah.
And the way he gets the assignment is that it's indiscriminate. Like, just go kill them. It's embarrassing to our side to know that there is a mixed species couple that has reproduced. And so, by way of background on that, the backstory is that Marco had been taken prisoner of Landfall, and they sent him to live in this Landfall prison on a planet called Cleve. And Alana was a guard there assigned to guard him on Cleve in this prison. And within 12 hours, apparently Marco is quite the sweet talker.
Yeah.
Because within 12 hours, they have both disappeared. They have escaped together. They have fallen in love. They get married, and Alana becomes pregnant with the baby Hazel, who is born in the first couple of pages of the story. And so they're going to be pursued. And that is really the story through volume 1, is Marco and Alana and their new baby being pursued. And so there's some other characters, these bounty hunters that are called freelancers. And we meet 2 of them in particular in this volume. They're being sent out by the Wreath Army. So these are the moon people. And their mission is to kill Marco and Alana, but retrieve the baby unharmed. And they have definite articles before their names, which I like very much. So the main one we're introduced to is the Will, and his cat, like large cat, who is called a lying cat, who senses when people are lying or not. And I had seen panels floating around on the internet before of this cat just going, lying.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where they were from. So when I saw that in the book, I was like, oh, that's who this is. But there's another bounty hunter called the Stalk, Stalk, who is also sent out as a freelancer to hunt down and kill Marco and Alana. That will be in conflict in this book as well.
Do the freelancers, what did you think of them? Any thoughts? It doesn't get super deep in as far as you've read on them.
Right.
Any thoughts on them though as characters?
Well, the Will is an interesting character in that, I mean, he's a ruthless killer. He knows and accepts exactly what he is. He doesn't seem to have any high moral opinion of himself.
Okay.
But we learn that he is very much in love with the Stalk, who was a former lover of his, that they've had some kind of separation. And to see the way he is impacted throughout this, just being torn up by knowing that he's on a mission working in parallel, not together, but in parallel with the Stalk, whom he still has these deep feelings for. I thought that was pretty interesting as personalizing an otherwise very gruff and unlikable character.
Yeah. So whenever I was reading this, this is the beginning stages of this whole story. Marco and Alana get together and they make this mixed race baby that everyone seems to have a problem with.
Yeah.
And then as you go through the book, you find out the Will, who is human, as far as we can tell, he's just regular human. The Stalk is half spider, half lady, half demon. I don't know.
Wild looking, whatever she is.
And nobody seems to have a problem with their union. It's just this is I think we're focused on the wrong union here. This lady is definitely not a good person. She's got red eyes. That's usually a good indicator.
That's a sign. Red eyes and jaggedy word balloons.
Yeah,
always a good tip off. Well, that's funny. Although it seems like the rest of the galaxy is very antithetical toward this war. Unless it has shown up on their door, and so often it has, they don't care about the squabbles between the people of Landfall and the Wreath. And the reason why this love is so forbidden between Marco and Alana, of course, is because Alana's of the Landfall and Marco is of the Wreath.
Yeah.
I would imagine that with the Will and the Stalk, they come from cultures that just don't care anything about this. But you're right, though. This is a big issue in that community of both the Wreath and the Landfall. Okay, Craig, we've talked through so much of the world building and the backstory and the alignment of all these different people, which is a lot of what we get in issues 1 and 2. Let's do something differently than how we often do on this podcast. And rather than just go through, the story beat by beat, let's talk about some of kind of the bigger issues and the bigger just occurrences from those issues, say 3 through 6. And so in issue 3, we have the introduction of a character called Isabel, who really sort of becomes part of the family here. And do you want to talk to us a little bit about Isabel, a native of the planet Cleve?
Yeah. So Isabel is Hazel's first babysitter. I think that's actually the word that she uses is babysitter. But she is first seen as this horrific figure.
She's a ghost.
The Marco knows of her and I guess her species as the horrors, and that they're just gonna kill you on sight.
Right.
And so our first thought is okay, not to be trusted, but they're just kids. They're kids who have died in this war, for, eons ago or whatever.
And so it turns out when the natives of that planet Cleve, when they die, they stay around as ghosts.
Yeah.
And I guess can have some impact on the world.
Yeah, they're supposed to be like the protectors. Like they remain there to protect their planet, and they're not doing a great job. And they know this. They bring it up. But they're kids. Like Isabel is cut in half.
Right,
like in a very gory way. Like the lower half of her body is missing. But she is, I guess, in a predicament because Hazel is sick. Alana and Marco are also not doing great at this point. Like they're running from the law. They're battling through other battles. The battle literally happening on the planet.
Right.
But Isabel, she sees the opportunity to help these people. That's not what was expected on Marco's behalf, but at this point he's knocked out anyways. So
that's right. But on top of that, she also sees some opportunity for herself here.
Yeah.
We learned that these people of Cleve, when they're in their ghost form, are bound to the planet and cannot leave it, even though it's not a fun place to be anymore, unless they bind themselves to the soul of another living being that's leaving the planet.
Yeah.
And so really, Isabel is making a proposition to Alana saying, like, look, you don't know me. You don't know whether you can trust me, but I'll tell you this. I know this planet. I know how to get to this rocket forest that you and Marco are heading toward in hopes of escaping from this planet. And I can get you there, but you have to take me with you. And the way you take me with you is not just I'm a passenger. It's you're going to bind me to the soul of your infant.
Yeah. That
big ask.
It was kind of funny, like, they don't know each other. But like to survive, it's gonna happen. You have to do this to survive, because Marco at this point is injured, and Marco's the only one that can do magic, and they have to have snow to do the spell.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. And so Alana's like, there's no snow. I don't know how we're going to do this. And then thankfully Isabel's like, well, actually I can show you that too. And like, that's kind of how she like wiggles her way into their lives of like, I'll show you how to do this, but only if you bind me to Hazel.
Well, and so ultimately she has to make this very hard decision that, she doesn't know what the long-term consequences of this are going to be. And frankly, Hazel seems like a very nice child here as she's presenting to begin with, but we don't know if there's another dark side to her, or we're not even seeing her true like form. There's a lot of questions that I'm sure are racing through Alana's head when she makes this decision that like, okay, this is life or death for my family here. So fine, we're going to bind you to the soul of my infant here.
Yeah.
And
I think too, for Isabel, I wondered, reading this the second time through, if she knew like what they were, like that the world saw them as a problem, like Marco and Alana, like if they knew, or if Isabel knew that joining with this specific child would come with some major consequences, because I mean she's not getting away from that if she's bound to this kid.
Oh, that's a great point, that she maybe is signing up for more than she had bargained for as well. And so I'm glad that we get a chance to meet this character who, and by the way, she gets Alana and the family over to the snowy part of the planet, and so this spell is able to take effect, and Marco is able to really sort of sit up Undertaker style and come back to life like he was never harmed. And
Isabel is, I mean, she's been around for hundreds of years. She's mature. Like she looks like a child, half a child. Because she's been cut in half, but she's mature. Like she knows how to take care of kids. If you want a babysitter, this is the one you want.
Yeah. And so something else about her though, she can only come out at night. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So during the day, she has to go back inside of Hazel.
Yeah.
Which is always an interesting limitation to put on a character. They can only appear at certain times or under certain conditions. Well, let's move into issue 4, which is a very different issue. The Will, who's one of those freelancer bounty hunters we talked about before. I think he has decided that because the stalk is also going to be on the same mission hunting this family, first of all, he thinks his work is probably futile because the stalk is such an efficient killer that the job's probably already done. He's probably not going to get the bounty. And then also, I think probably he's trying to avoid connecting again with the stalk because, he has some residual pain from the end of their relationship. But what he does have is an expense account card. Yep. So he takes a detour in this whole issue, which there's a big character development for the Will that we see through this issue. And were it not for that, I probably would have just skipped over this issue altogether.
Yeah.
Because he goes to basically an orgy planet.
Sextillion.
Sextillion is the name of the planet. That's right.
Really, really just hitting the nail on the head with the name of this planet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what he is doing there is he is going to take a little mini vacation and just live out his fantasies. And as he's wandering around on this planet where we see all kinds of beings in all kinds of, this goes back to the gratuitous nature of what I had complained about with issue 1, in all kinds of arrangements and alignments, he is not finding fulfillment here. He's still sad. He's not able to enjoy himself. And so he encounters a guy who sees this on his face, and he says, I think I have something that you're looking for. And so this guy takes the Will down to a lower dungeon, basically, where he says he's going to introduce him to this sex slave, which, look, folks, we know this is creepy. This is the story.
Yeah.
But even the Will is turned off when this guy opens the door, and what he finds on the other side is a 6-year-old child.
Yeah.
And at this point, honestly, Craig, I was turned off enough that I thought, okay, this is uncalled for. I'm not sure if I even want to soldier on.
It's sick at this, you see that and you're like, oh gosh, what? I mean, when I first read it, I remember this part and being like, well, bad purchase, okay.
Yeah, right, we made a mistake. And, I should say, though, for all of the graphic things that are depicted, this child is fully clothed, and we just understand her predicament.
Yeah.
We don't, there's not anything that's maybe should be illegal or whatever going on in this book. But the Will's response to this, and remember, this guy is a hired killer. He goes around and kills people indiscriminately, including children, on other planets as part of his job. But he turns around and he sort of does one of those, how Andre the Giant used to box people by their ears, you know? He does one of these to this guy, except he explodes the guy's head between his hands.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
That is, if you're seeing a guy who deals in sex slave stuff, I think that's an appropriate response if you're gonna take him out.
Good comeuppance for sure.
Clap on both ears and explode the head.
And so the Will thinks, okay, there's a hero in him that kicks in. He grabs this child and he is going to try and escape this planet. But on the way out, he encounters a being of some kind who, 1, has taken possession of his lying cat, and 2, says that she's the owner of this child, and that the Will can't leave with her, and offers to sell her for so much money that the Will couldn't possibly ever do it. What's interesting, though, is rather than the Will being able to just take the child by force and escape, the woman explains that a poison of some kind has been put into this child, that if she leaves this planet before her term of service and sex slavery is up, her arteries will basically turn to cement and she's going to die immediately. And the lying cat does not detect a lie in this. And so he knows he has to find some other way to solve this problem. And what we see is a turn in this character where forget the mission that he was sent on, forget whatever he hoped to enjoy on this pleasure planet. He has a new purpose.
Yeah. The Will is, I will say, one of my least favorite characters in this story. And man, trust me, I thought of this specific issue multiple times of should I recommend this to read for the podcast?
You sicko.
Because it is so sick. And sometimes I guess a question for you is, when you see something so sick and twisted in a story, does that help you get into the story more or less so?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Because for me, I was like, I hate reading this, but I read it and I'm like, man, this is so messed up. And it makes it original. It does. It's kind of like a HBO show, and it's just there's some dark stuff that happened, But man, it really drives the story of like, you're now feeling like how sick and twisted this is.
Yeah.
And you grow to hate things, and that
It does
it's an
make it-
emotion. Hate is an emotion. If you're feeling emotions, then the writers did their job.
It makes it more compelling. I agree with you for sure. And I will also say this was more of a punch in the gut when this guy opens the door and reveals this very innocent looking child. I think because there had been so much else in the issue as they're exploring this sextillion planet that was weird and gross and seemingly unnecessary. And I mean, it wouldn't have been a turn on as something to read, obviously.
Or actually, I think the first page is just like a woman's head with legs or something. And I was like, when you see that, it's just like, okay, I'm a man. I have needs. I have desires. But this is not doing it for me.
These weren't your particular desires.
No, it's a little out there. It's a little too weird.
Well, and I think because over the course of the issue, you've sort of trained your mind to anticipate something gross but totally weird.
Yeah.
And not be something that, like, we could think of in the terms of our real world behind this door. You know, I expected something with, like, legs coming out of their head or, the other direction or, whatever. And instead, it's like, no, this is just child sex trafficking like happens in real life.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, it really was like a punch in the stomach. Mm-hmm. And it made me want to put it down. But when I saw the determination it created in the will, it did make the story more compelling. Yeah. I agree. 100%. And also, it's not so dark that the child can't be saved.
Yeah.
We know that there is hope for this child, at least at this point. We don't have resolution to that by the end of this first volume. I'm going to presume that that's not a plot point that's just left dangling. I think you have to wrap something
I'll go ahead and ruin this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Things go okay.
Good.
Yeah. I feel like if we've said all the bad stuff about this for the listeners, I'll just go ahead and say it doesn't end with all bad. There's a good turn to this part of the story.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that much, at least. Issue 5, as we move into that, it takes us back to focusing on the family and them being pursued across this planet Cleve. Particularly at the very beginning, our Prince 4, the robot guy, gets word from one of his scout teams that's out there scouring the planet. They have discovered these folks.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this or not, but there is a book that he is reading. It is called A Nighttime Smoke by D. Oswald Heist.
Okay, and this was a book we had introduced earlier in the story as being the type of romance novel, it seemed like, that Alana really liked.
And
he was trying to find out, I'm sorry, but Prince the Four was trying to find out, who is this Alana person that I'm pursuing? And so one of the witnesses he had questioned, another guard, had said, she liked reading these romance novels. And he actually gets a copy of this particular one.
Yeah, it's to me, one of the funnier parts of the story is just that the only clue is that she just likes romance novels.
It's this Harlequin.
Yeah. And the book itself, it becomes like a big part of the story. And it's honestly one of my favorite parts is just that this unknown romance novel is like a big fueling point for everything that's happening.
Is that right? And we don't get a ton of that in this first volume. Although we are left at the end of issue 6, at the end of the first volume, with our next destination relating to going to the planet where the author of this romance novel is.
Yeah.
And it actually kind of reminded me, have you read much Kurt Vonnegut?
No, I haven't.
In a lot of Vonnegut's novels, there is a sci-fi author who turns up from time to time, or is at other times just the obsession of other characters, named Kilgore Trout. And Kilgore Trout, over the course of his career, had written all of these dime store paperback novels, all sci-fi books that had these weird esoteric plots. And there's always a character of one kind or another who's usually in a rough mental place, who discovers, this happens in multiple Vonnegut books, who discovers the writings of Kilgore Trout and decides that Kilgore Trout is like the oracle, like the most prescient author of the age, and they need to go like seek him out, which is how he sometimes ends up being like brought into a small town to be the keynote speaker at the town's 150th anniversary celebration or whatever.
I mean, it's I guess I've never read. I'm trying to think. Is it Slaughterhouse-5?
Yeah, Slaughterhouse-5.
Okay.
In fact, I think there's reference to Kilgore Trout in Slaughterhouse-5. I'm gonna send you home today with some with some Vonnegut paperbacks.
Because I guess whenever I read this, I thought of, what's the one that the guy like killed John Lennon over? Is that?
Oh, Catcher in the Rye.
Okay, because that's what I had thought of whenever seeing like how much this book has an influence, and I'm like, okay, I think I've seen this before.
Sure.
But like in real life, and that somebody read this and
right, yeah, that the guy who killed John Lennon was caught with he had like a bunch of copies of The Catcher in the Rye.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's such a good book. But that's another one that I think has been like an object of obsession for people who have gone on to do very, very bizarre things and violent things, which I don't know why. It's a great book. I don't know why it would inspire you to do anything like that. Actually, the other thing it made me think of, Craig, was in Scientology, the writings of L. Ron Hubbard, which are written as science fiction, and then end up being adopted as the basis of this religion, or at least as I understand it anyway. To our Scientology audience, forgive me if I've mischaracterized. But it just sort of reminded me of a figure like that, like who wrote some fiction that heavily influenced people and changed the course of their lives.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, on the way to my graphic novel store, or Phantom Comics, about 400 feet away is the Church of Scientology.
Oh, wow.
Walk by it all the time. And every time I am interested to like go in and just be like, hey, I want to take your test. I just want to see. I just want to know what this is about. Am I the next L. Ron Hubbard? I want to know.
I wonder how what kind of reaction that would get. And funny enough, this is the second 2-person episode in a row for Scientology to come up. It came up in our True Cult episode as well. How odd. I promise this podcast is not some secret backdoor into any religion. Oh my goodness gracious! So you've talked about this book, and Prince the Fourth has it here. To move back to the action of the story, he tells this group of scouts basically that have caught up with the family, like, go get them, capture them, and so they attack Marco and Alana and the family. And Marco has made this vow, and I think you talked about this some earlier, that he is going to lay down his sword. He is not going to kill anymore. And it seems like this extends to even in defense of his family. Now, he still carries this sword, and when this group attacks, and he sees that unless he does something and breaks this vow that he's made to himself, his family is going to end right here. All of them are going to be killed. He starts swinging that sword. It seems like in a defensive way, where he's trying to chop down these, bullets or pellets or whatever is being shot at them, and like just sort of like that movie Wanted, slice them out of the air. And one of these, though, ricochets and hits Alana, and he thinks maybe his wife has been killed or at least badly wounded here. And this is where he sort of loses control of himself. He cuts off one guy's hand with his sword. Then he starts doing the whole Jason Bourne, like punching, and he's kicking, he's headbutting, and he is like losing control of himself. Although it doesn't seem that he's really killed anybody, but he's incapacitated them all. And he raises up, and he's got his sword over his head, and he's about to bring it down and start delivering fatal blows on his fallen foes. And he gets shot with a taser.
Yeah.
And we look, and it turns out it was Alana who shoots him with her taser that she's carrying. It's like a stun gun, basically.
And he's happy about it. Like, I don't know if happy is the word, but he's glad that she stepped up and phasered him before he went to ape mode and just took out everybody.
That's right. He's thankful for it, at least. He had already succumbed to engaging in violence again that he had sworn off. But before he could just kill all of his enemies, I don't want to say spell, but like the semi-trance that he seems to have gone into in this fighting is broken. And so they just tie up the victims and leave them behind instead. And they flee to make their way through the woods to this rocket forest that they're in pursuit of on the planet.
And then that's, I guess, when the stock kind of shows up. And, I mean, she's still on the mission while the will is doing his thing on Sextillion. And she shows up just a minute too late when the will calls her about his situation, about trying to get the child off planet. Like, one, he's still in love with her. Like, we kind of figure this, throughout the whole thing, that he's still in love with her. But now he like finally admits it, but only at a time of like when they're both in desperation mode of needing each other's service.
Right.
So, the stock is brought up for a little bit, and it's obvious, like, to us, the reader, she's important, but then she gets shot out of nowhere. And I was not ready. It really took me by surprise, but
yeah, it's really wild. So she has found these soldiers from landfall, and she's like inspecting them while she's talking on the phone to the will. And, she's trying to make sense of how these folks have been taken down and tied up, when, unbeknownst to her, approaching is Prince 4.
Yeah. Who is, I mean, I will say, I love Prince Robot. He's my favorite character.
I keep calling him Prince 4. Prince Robot the 4th.
Yeah, I always just say Prince Robot or Robot. It's more my testament against knowing Roman numerals. But in one of the earlier issues, he finds out that he and his wife are pregnant. I know they have a TV head. They probably don't seem like they could give birth, but they do.
They can.
It's just another crazy part of the story. And so whenever he arrives at the scene, the stock, being a freelancer, she is allowed to do basically whatever she wants. She has a license to kill. And I feel like it was kind of pertinent to today, of like just cops being on the scene. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel for their situation, because you don't know what you're walking into all the time. And this, I think, kind of shows pretty beautifully what might be going through your head as a police officer. If you're in a situation where there's possibly, shots being fired or something, but Prince Robot shows up to the scene, and one of the other guards says she's reaching for something, talking about the stock. And the screen on Prince Robot's head flashes to a little baby toy that, I don't know. I don't have kids. I don't know what those things are called.
Like a rattle.
A rattle. Thank you. So you can tell, like, he's thinking, oh my gosh, like, if I don't do something, my kid's going to be fatherless. And so in just a split second, he just immediately turns his arm into a gun and blows the stock away. I guess I should say, I don't think that that's necessarily cops are allowed to do whatever they want sort of thing. Sure. I definitely don't believe that.
Didn't think you were endorsing police violence.
Yeah. But you can tell, like, he is on, he's in a predicament that he needs to come out alive because he is thinking about his kid. I mean, throughout the rest of the story, you just feel so much for the prince. I don't know why, because he's the least humanoid, I guess, in a sense, that his head's a screen. But that situation, I think, is where this situation specifically is where I first started to be like, I like the robot.
It deepens the character.
Yeah. I like seeing, like, it's just a split second of like, this is what I'm thinking about. And you see it right there. Like, I'm thinking about my kid.
Now, of course, also, there's limits to the police analogy, in that Prince Robot is, just designed to kill anyway. I mean, that's he probably, even if it weren't for having to make this split second decision, would have thought about it a moment and then killed the stock. But I do take your point very well, though, that he feels a threat to his life, and he sees it as something bigger than just fear for his own life, but for what it means to the life of an unborn child, that he will be the father to. And I think it's really something.
I do think too, I mean, I know actually, because I've read the whole thing, but this, I mean, it's just kind of this thing that Marco says at the beginning is just violence begets more violence. And he killed the stock. Well, who's in love with the stock? The will. So things are going downhill from here. He has just unknowingly caused himself a lot of damage.
That's right. And we should say as well, the will was still on the other end of this communicator with the stock when this happened.
Yeah.
And so the will is not going to have any question in his mind about who's responsible for the killing of the love of his life.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about issue 6 a little bit. And this is an issue where it's good to wrap up the first volume because finally Marco and Alana and family reach the rocket forest where they expect to find a rocket as a way of getting off of this planet and going on to their next destination, whatever that might be. And so they've been following this map and they've been using the guidance of Isabel. And here they are, they've arrived at the forest. But what they see in front of them is the charred remains of a forest. They don't see a standing tree anywhere, but just burnt ground and ash and burnt stumps.
For me, the originality thing that I look for in a graphic novel, this is where it comes in for me, is like, all right, we're going to get a rocket ship from a forest. Like, it's just weird, doesn't make sense, and I mean, this rocket ship is cool. Like, it's made of wood, you know? We see it at the end of the issue, really, and when everything kind of comes together and they finally get their way off Cleve. But this rocket ship, I was just like, man, you know, when you're a kid, you probably played with Legos. You probably built a rocket ship at some point. I've made dozens, I know. And you look at it and you're like, man, I could never have imagined this. Mm-hmm. Like, whoever came up with this idea, well done on your behalf for making that.
And to explain why there is a ship to be seen when it seems like things were hopeless, they've gotten to this forest and it's basically dusk now. And so Isabel is still inside of Hazel and not with them. But as they stand there looking at this burnt down forest and thinking, you know, whatever rockets were supposed to be growing out of the ground here are all gone, Isabel wakes up and comes out of Hazel and explains, like, yeah, my people have some craft about us. You know, there are certain things that are hidden here that you're just not seeing. And then she reveals to them this treehouse rocket ship that you were just describing. And this is the first time I think I've encountered this in any book that we've done on this show. But there's a double-page spread of the rocket ship, but to look at it, you would have to turn your book and hold it vertically like a pinup or something like that to see on this double-page spread this beautiful, bizarre tree rocket ship.
And it also shows the Wills, his ship. It kind of looks like an acorn. I don't know if they just like tried to do that on purpose. Like, oh, let's give them all like plant tree themes or something.
I hadn't picked up on that.
Yeah, I noticed it the other day when I was rereading it. I was like, oh, it kind of looks like an acorn. Like, it has like a little spinny top, like a helicopter that comes out of the ship that looks to me just like an acorn.
That's cool. So Isabel explains to the family as they're getting ready to just go jump on this ship that it's not going to just open its doors for them and let them in. The ship is either sentient or has some lifelike response to the people. And Isabel explains it requires a sacrifice in order to allow you to take hold of the ship, to board it. And without hesitating, really, Marco pulls out that sword that we had learned was this passed down important family heirloom, and he breaks it over his knee, and he drops, one half of the sword right there on the ground in this forest and says, that's all right, I don't need it anymore. Let's go board the ship. And sure enough, that is an acceptable sacrifice. And the family is able to board and behold like this beautiful interior of this ship.
Yeah, I'd live on this ship. It's pretty nice.
It is. It's very cool inside.
It does kind of have the, in Harry Potter, it's one of the movies, they have, the tent set up. I think it's the fourth one. It looks small and dingy from the outside, but then on the inside, you're like, okay, yeah, I'd stay here for a while.
Right. It's like a big palatial place inside. Yeah, it does kind of have that little to big type effect. And so we have gotten off of the planet Cleve. It seems for a moment like there is escape ahead for this family. And it's funny, they start talking about, where is it that we're going to go next? Because they hadn't even really addressed this before. It's like they had so much focus that they had to put into getting off of the planet. They hadn't really talked about what their destination would be. But Olenna tells them immediately she wants to go to a place called Quietus, where she says the wisest people in the world live. And about that time, we see in a separate location, your buddy Prince Robot, he's holding a nighttime smoke in his hand, and he opens up the book and he looks at the author page, and it has a picture of this man with a white fluffy beard that makes him sort of wizened looking, I suppose. And then I guess he's a cyclops. He's got just one giant eye right in the middle of his face. But the description beneath his author photo says that he resides on a planet called Quietus. And as you mentioned before, when something is important, sometimes it shows up on Prince Robot's screen face, and Quietus registers across that face. And so we know that as we move into Volume 2, there is going to be a continued pursuit, that this family is not just going to ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this in life, but I have a place where, like, if all things just fell downhill, if my life just took a tumble, where I'd go. And that place is Hot Springs, Arkansas. Okay. I have always said, if I'm going downhill, I'm going to go hang out in the bathtub, enjoying the hot springs like Al Capone. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And to me, it was kind of funny just seeing, like, I'm going to go here because of a book. Like, that's a huge leap to take. I've read a lot of books. I've never read one that I was just like, oh, you know what? I'm going to, like, base my life on this.
Yeah, right.
But I have my spot. Like, if I'm going somewhere when life takes the worst turn it could.
Are you sure? You want the public to know about your bug out location?
Yeah, I guess I don't want everybody joining me there.
Well, too late. It's recorded, and I don't edit these things.
But yeah, I tell everybody, like, Hot Springs, man, that's, like, you could go there every day, get in the bath, and just enjoy yourself. Get a few essential oils. I'm a spa guy. I want to be spa'd up. And I mean, no offense to her choice, but I don't, she's going for an author, not a spa. It's just, I don't know. It makes no sense in my brain.
Well, I suppose we all have different value systems, don't we? Well, there's one last development before we leave this first volume. There is an attack that occurs on this ship. We have 2 soldiers in full armor from the Wreath who just appear out of nowhere magically on the ship. And we realize pretty quickly that, oh yeah, that magical sword that was broken probably has, some residue.
Some alarm setting on it?
I guess so, right? That triggers some people from Wreath to know where to come. And these 2 soldiers show up, and the first thing they do is they shoot Isabel, even though she is a ghost. I say shoot. They're like shooting magic out of their hands or something like that. And even though she is a ghost, Isabel is like pinned to the wall, and it looks like blood is coming out of her. I assume that she is dead at this point. And as the battle ensues, these 2 soldiers from Wreath come out of their armor, their helmets that they're wearing, and we discover that it's actually Marco's parents. And then on the very last page of the volume, we have in that narrative voice of Hazel that has been guiding us through this whole journey, it has a picture of the Marco's parents, and then it just says, and then my parents came to live with us. So we've got a new twist and a growth in the family in the very last pages of this volume.
What a way to meet in-laws.
Yeah, that's right. Alana's never met them before.
Yeah, she hasn't met them. They're just coming guns a-blazing. What a way.
Well, that wraps that up. And, Craig, through this discussion, I am persuaded. I am going to read on.
I highly encourage it. It really gets into the characters. And that is, honestly, that's what keeps me going, is like, if I know a character, like if I can get myself in their mindset, I'm hooked. I'm ready to continue going along for the ride. As far as the gratuitous sex goes, I do not endorse or anything like that. There might be a few other things that come along the way, but nothing, I think, more so than Sextillion provides. So if you've gotten past that, you're good on the gratuitous sex part.
Well, fair enough. Oh, goodness gracious. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for listening and being with us today. I want to thank Craig for coming in from out of town. And I mean, I'm glad we're getting to spend any time together, much less the amount of interruptions we've had over the course of this recording session. Dude, thank you for being so generous with your time today. This has been fantastic. And you can go back to Washington, D.C. now.
Okay. Well, first we got to play a board game with Garrett.
Oh, that's right. That was part of the promise, wasn't it?
Maggie is... Well, no, Maggie's napping now. Okay, we're good on Maggie.
We'll be okay there. And to all you listeners, I will look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, keep reading those comics.